All right, guys, we are all in. We're getting started. We have two attachments that we put in. One's the full presentation from Bernardo. And if everybody doesn't know, my name is Byron. I'm with Integrity Title, Relationship Director. We're all trying to work together between Ruttenberg, CMG, which Mike is over here on the other side. CMG, one of the attachments is from him to help you guys out with how much a seller can contribute towards closing costs. There's a PDF there. And then Bernardo Piccolo, your fellow Ruttenberg agent, number 7. Are you number 7?
Yeah.
Yep, number 7 in the company. Has been with them forever. So this is a presentation that he does on a continuous basis with buyers. And everybody will be muted during until we start taking questions. But right now, if you haven't and you just logged in, please, yes, guys that were messaging, there was no audio because it was muted. The PDFs, please download them all and get them either up on maybe a little side preview so you can see that. And
if they can print it, it'd be even better.
if you have time to print it out real quick,
Just
if
for
you're in
notes,
your
for
offices,
note-taking purposes.
that's fine for notes, but if not, you know.
How do I get this?
Where are you at?
This stuff out of here. So I'm gonna give you.
Make sure microphone. So the microphone is on that too, so we don't have to worry about mics on this. PDFs are in the chat. If you don't see them, scroll up. Put them in again in a minute. So we got. There's both attachments again for everybody. And then again, I'm going to have everybody muted.
When we start the role play,
Yeah.
fake like a call.
Okay.
We'll kind of take it from there.
Okay.
Are you ready?
All right. So.
All right.
All right. So in this scenario right now, we're going to do kind of a role play. So I'm the buyer, and Bernardo is doing the buying agent's portion.
That'll be in a second. But,
In a second.
So my name is Bernardo Piccolo. I've been licensed since 2001. I've been with Ruttenberg now since 2001 as well. Done a little bit over 1,000 transactions. Out of the 1,000 transactions I've done, 60% of them roughly were buyers, 40% sellers. Don't do a whole lot of rentals. The idea of this class today is basically we have a problem that we have to overcome now when we meet with clients. We have to get them to sign an agreement with us, promising that they're going to pay us a considerable amount of money. And it's very hard to get them to sign that if they don't see the value on whatever services you're offering. So I have been using this presentation since I started. So it's been roughly 20 years now, 30 years actually. It takes about an hour to get a buyer from the first phone call until I'm actually able or willing to send them any listings. So the way I normally do it is I get a call, I try to figure out what they're looking for in a very basic way. And then the first thing is setting an appointment to sit down face to face to go through all this information that we're going to go through and create a few different, create value basically, create a situation where they see the value on retaining your services for whatever amount of dollars you're going to charge them. On your packages, there are a few forms that if you can have them handy, I think it would be pretty helpful. First one is the buyer data. So it's basically this form. There's a lot of important things in it that will help you, prior to showing them homes, during the process of showing them homes, and then once you get to the time of writing an offer, there's going to be a lot of information here that you can go back and forth in between you, the buyer, and the lender without asking your buyers the same question a dozen times throughout the process. Second form that is pretty important is this one right here. This is pretty much, it's kind of a roadmap for the actual buyer presentation. But it's really nothing more than all the steps in a purchase transaction. So it starts at first meeting, ends at when they get the keys for the house. And then this is something that when I went through CRS and GRI and all those other designations I went through, some of the instructors had this, and I always thought it was pretty cool. It's basically, I started with 4 ideas of things that will make you thousands of dollars, and they may sound simple, but when you start utilizing them correctly, this should translate to, this could translate to $100,000 income a year or 200, whatever your goals are. What I suggest you guys do is, as we're going through the presentation, anything that you hear that you think is a good idea that you can use it again, write it down so you can remember it tomorrow when you're going through your notes and so on. And then on the flip side of that, if you hear something today that you don't like, we're open to hearing that as well. If I say something that you think is offensive, my goal is not to do that, but if I do, let us know. We want to make this as productive as we can. The other form you have is one that Michael provided. Basically, this is going to break down the types of financing available and then how much seller contribution you're allowed to get on each type of financing and depending on the down payment and so on. And this is going to be helpful when it comes down to closing costs, cash out of pocket, and nowadays that we have to figure out where the commission is going to come from. This is very valuable. I would add this to your own presentation when you put yours together, because this is good stuff. So I have a presentation that is basically it's a tangible presentation. It's on paper. The reason I do it on paper, I think there's a lot of folks out there that are visual, and some folks are more they just listen to it and they kind of take the information just by listening. But in an effort to be able to provide both types of people with information, I usually show it to them, I write stuff down, and then I leave this with them so they can read it afterwards. This is a sample for you guys to kind of start yours from. You don't have to have every single page that I have in here. You can do this with 10 pages, you can do it with 100 pages. On the end of the day, this is basically just a tool. If it's not used correctly, it's worthless. This is just a pile of papers that if you just hand it to someone, they're not going to read it and you're not going to get anywhere with it. And most of the time we're going to spend today is basically going through this to try to help you get all the information that you have as an agent, all the value that you have as a professional out to your client so you can retain them and then convert them into a true client by getting them to sign the buyer's broker. And then, of course, getting referrals and all that stuff afterwards. I think we need to start how can we get the PowerPoint down?
You want the PowerPoint up?
Yeah.
Do you,
Can I share it from
I'm
there?
gonna find you. Alright. Now you
Okay.
gotta do share screen. Hit OK first. Done. Share screen.
To just send it to you.
It's right here.
I'm gonna pass,
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna pass it around so you guys can kind of flip through it. That's the benefit of being in class. You get to touch stuff.
I want one of these. I've been wanting to make one.
Share screen.
Yeah. And you can pick.
We'll get better at this. All right. How can I share it? Let's do the slideshow or something. Sorry, guys. We're just trying to do this.
See all the green lights?
Yeah.
That's all.
All right, perfect. All right. So we already went to the intro. So the goal of the buyer's presentation, you want to create value, You want to create retention, discovery and direction, control, compliance, and then eventually you're going to get your buyer's broker agreement signed. Create value is basically provide your clients or your prospective clients with valuable information that will allow them to justify paying you guys money for your knowledge and time and services. If you do a good job on creating value, you're going to have retention, because basically if they go in an open house and they talk to a different agent and they only have 5 minutes to talk to them, and if you only spend 5 minutes with them on the phone before you created your own relationship, you're competing. Basically, they have nothing to lose, right? If you do this properly, by the time you're done with this hour presenting this to them, they're going to really think they need you, and they should. So that your retention is going to increase drastically. Going back 20 years, my retention is around 96%. So basically, every buyer I sit with, if they buy a house, 96% of the time they bought with me. The times that they didn't buy was because either we didn't click, and that happens. There was probably twice, I think twice that I can remember, when I lost a buyer to an open house, or they just went to a builder and bought it by themselves. It's very powerful if it's done correctly. A lot of the stuff came out of CRS, a lot of the stuff came out of GRI, ABR, a lot of the designations that they're offered in general. I think there is a class on GRI or CRS, I believe, that is guided to buyers of representation. And I think part of the class is creating this presentation. That may be a good class for you guys to seek to get it as well. A little expensive, and I think we're going to go into more detail here than they did then, because they had other information to go through, but it's worth it. Discovery and direction is basically trying to figure out what their needs are, so you have directions on how you're going to take them. Are they going to get pre-approved? Are they going to come up with proof of funds? Are they moving in the next 2 weeks? Are they moving in 6 months? That's kind of the idea there. Control is basically not controlling the buyer, but controlling the transaction. You're the professional, and therefore you should be the one in control, because you know, or should know, what's going to happen on the following steps. So this is part of the process of helping someone buy a house, is taking over and saying, okay, this is the next step. This is how we do it. This is the best way to do this step. This is what we shouldn't do, so we don't lose a house or lose a deposit or whatever. And then the last step is compliance, which is going to be basically making sure that we have all the paperwork that we need to be in compliance with our office, with the state, and with NAR. And nowadays we have the DOJ on top of us too, but that's a whole different story. So the last part of this whole thing is having the buyer ready to sign the buyer broker's agreement. So just a few parts of an actual tangible presentation. Obviously, a cover page, try to illustrate something that is professional. You can put your bio on the first page. You can put, it's really whatever you feel like is the right way to start. We chose to go with this. We have been so busy that we haven't really gone back and changed it because it's working. But cover page is basically just trying to give a first impression. A mission statement is definitely something that you should have in there. Most people are not going to read it, but you should go back every once in a while, every 6 months, every year, and read your own mission statement and try to remember why you do what you do. At some point in your life, you said, I'm going to get a real estate license and I'm going to be a buyer's agent, a broker's, a listing agent. I'm going to be a millionaire. There was a reason that you came up with that idea of getting your license. And it's important for you to remember that, and also important for you to think why and how you're going to get from where you are today and where your goal was or where your goal is today. What's going on here? All right. So mission statement, I would just Google if you don't have one. 3 steps to making a good mission statement, and that should be pretty helpful. Try to be honest on it. Don't try to make this a sales pitch because it will probably backfire. Just a little bit more about us. That's the third page of our presentation. Just gives a bio basically about me and my wife. I work with Julie. She's been in the business now 30 years as well. She was in new construction for probably 80% of her career. Done probably more than 1,000 homes. She's probably done 15 to 2,000 homes throughout the time she's been doing it. So here, just a little bio about both of us. You can put some reviews, maybe copy and paste some of the reviews you got from your clients out of maybe Realtor.com or one of those sites. We have a page here about Rothenberg. Basically, there is value on presenting the company you work for, especially when you work for a company that is as big as ours. There's something that should be said about this too, is buyers have a tendency, or clients have a tendency to think of their real estate company as the most important thing, and then the agent second. This perception that we're working with a monster like us versus the guy across the street here with 2 agents, that's the most important thing, is who you work for. That is relevant, but in my opinion, I think the real estate agencies are more about us as the agents than they are about the final, the end client. So it's important for you to basically relate, the benefits of your big company or the big company you work with, but still highlight that the main thing is they have to identify with you so you can help them, because you're going to be the one there holding their hand and helping them with the process. Couple things that is impressive that should be related to the clients. In 2023, Rothenberg did over $2.4 billion in volume. There's not a whole lot of companies out there that can say that, not just in Florida, but everywhere. We're a little bit over 20% of the Pinellas market. We're a little bit over 10% of the total Tampa Bay market. That's a big deal. We have 2,300 agents. That's a big deal, but I don't know how helpful that would be for you, but you should know that. And we do about 600 transactions a month. And I think I was talking to Mike Webb. At some point, we did 1,100 in 1 month. I mean, that's insane how many transactions that is. I don't think there's any offices out there that can say the same thing.
The number of agents is helpful when you're trying to do showings, because you don't
It
have to
is.
have the BBA signed for
It is. That's going to become very important
That's
now.
going to be very important for the size of
And then, whenever we get to the point of how we're going to communicate compensation and so on, I think if you're in an office that has 2,300 agents, you're going to be able to communicate that a lot easier. But anyways, so home buying process, this is where we're going to spend probably about 90% of the time that we're here today. We're going to do a little role playing here just to try to illustrate how I do it. I'm not saying that it's the right way. I'm not saying that it's the best way. It's the way it works for me, and I think I have the numbers to back it up. So just get whatever is good for you, see whatever works for you, whatever you think is relevant or not, and just go with it. We're going to follow this page here pretty much as a map, so we can stay on track on what we're doing. And here's where we're actually, all right, I'm going to go back one. So now Byron's going to call me as a prospective buyer to give you some background on Byron. He was referred to me by a friend of his wife's coworker. Oh, actually, he said we don't have.
No, I'm single,
He's single.
at least for this.
So he was referred to me, and we'll kind of come up with who referred him as we go.
All right, so now I'm calling Bernardo in a sense. Hello, hello, ring, ring, ring. Bernardo.
Hello, it's Bernardo.
Yep.
Hey, Byron.
Hey, how are you?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Good. I got referred to you by a friend, and I'm looking to buy my first house.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you for calling. Who referred you?
It was Tina Kendall.
Got it.
Yeah.
From Integrity.
Yeah, she's a nice
Gotcha.
girl. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Is this the first time you're buying?
This is my first time I'm buying. Yes.
All right. So I would love to find a time for us to sit down.
Okay.
If you have about 45 minutes to an hour.
Yep.
I want to sit down with you. I want to answer all your questions. I want to explain the process, basically from A to Z.
Okay.
We'll talk about what you're looking for.
Mhm.
Then we'll figure out how to get there.
Okay.
What's your schedule like this week?
I'm open anytime after tomorrow.
You want to say tomorrow, 5 o'clock?
Sounds good.
Do you
Tomorrow.
want to come to my office, or do you want me to go to your house?
The office is fine.
Office is fine. All right, perfect. All right, so text me your address, and I'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, perfect.
All right. So I
Do it
texted
the
the
phone.
address.
All right, so I would say for safety, the office is always a better place to meet. If it's someone that is a referral, that you kind of feel like you have some type of a connection, I would rather meet at their home, at his house in this case. for two things. They as a client, they will feel more comfortable because you're in their environment, not on yours. And number two, you're going to walk into his home. You're going to see where he lives. You're going to see his furniture. You're going to kind of get a grasp for what his taste, right? I guess is like from a design standpoint. You're going to see that massive entertainment center he has with a 100-inch TV on it that you're going to have to figure out a way to put it later on as you're looking for a house. So you're going to get to know your client a little bit better because you're basically inside his home. But for safety, office is probably a good way to do it as well. Or you can go to Starbucks. So sitting down with him, we got the presentation, basically in front of us. Really, we would go back to page 1 and kind of go through the bio, the Rothenberg, and so on. But we already went through that. So we're going to go ahead and jump through the home buying process, and we're going to start at basically counseling. So we're sitting down. We, broke the ice already. I brought this so we can go through it.
Okay.
It's going to help us make sure we go over everything that we need to go through. That way I don't forget to ask you questions.
Okay.
And
So buying a house isn't me just giving money.
I mean, it can be, but it's probably not going to be the best way to do it.
Right, fair enough.
So basically, today we're here at counseling and qualifying interview. That's basically so we can get to meet each other. I can understand what you're looking for, and I can try to figure out how to help you get there. Do you know how real estate works?
And I guess enough to understand I need a mortgage,
Okay.
that kind of
All
stuff.
right. Well, let me go over that a little bit so you
Okay.
can kind of figure out how that works. So I'm stepping out away from him now, and that's where the big question comes in. And this is something that is brand new to us. I always went through this information, but now with the purpose that it has today. So basically, at that point, you're going to flip over to this page here, what illustrates basically, all the steps on the all the fields of the real estate market in a way. One, having the house as the main goal. Then you have your seller. And so I'm going to go back to him now and kind of explain to him how this works. So Byron, this is pretty much how buying a house or selling a house works, okay? Generally, in a normal scenario, you have a seller that owns a house. The seller could be a family, it could be a builder. When you have foreclosures, it could be a bank. They usually retain an agent, a listing agent. And the job of the listing agent is basically to market the home and try to get as many eyes on it to get the highest price for it.
Okay.
I mean, in a nutshell, that's pretty much their job. So the the listing agent gets a listing agreement signed with the seller. They're making a commitment of basically a marketing time and how much is going to be compensated and all that good stuff. Next step is they put a sign in front of the house.
Okay.
And then usually that property will go into the multiple listing service, which is the MLS. Okay. A buyer, when they get started, 97% of the transactions usually have a listing agent representing the seller and a buyer's agent representing the buyer. Now, with the new environment, buyer's agents are going to have to be in agreement in writing with the buyer. So now we're going to have a buyer's agent. The buyer goes into a buyer's agent agreement.
So I have to have an agreement.
So yeah, so just like the listing agent has a listing agreement, you're going to have a buyer agreement.
Okay.
We'll get to that in detail in a little bit, but I just want you to kind of visualize how it works and why that's there.
Okay.
So today we're going to talk about the house itself, what are you looking for, and then with that information, I'm going to go into MLS, I'm going to go into my builder database and all that kind of stuff and try to find you the ideal property. Okay. Does this make sense?
All makes sense.
All right, cool. Let's go back to our. This is just so you know what it looks like. This is what a buyer broker agreement is.
Okay.
When we get to the point of getting there, we'll go into detail about. So this is the one from Rothenberg. This is what our office has put together for us to use.
Is that the one
I
you're
need a new one.
still recommending that we use? I thought
The-
you guys had said to use the transaction broker one from Florida.
We'll check with Mike Webb and double check. We'll double check, but
So we use either or.
You're talking.
Yeah, I think it's either
This-
or.
This one seems much easier.
Much easier and.
This is
Because the
a
other
little more, it's more friendly, right?
I
It's
didn't-
not as,
I didn't see this on the dashboard when I.
Well, the other one says it asks for like a location, and then you're like, okay, what location, like how big, or do you have to be particular, do you have to fill one out for each house, like, or now it says, okay, Dunedin, Clearwater,
Right.
or do it,
well,
you know.
we'll check with Mike to make sure. As far as I know, we're able to use either one. And this one is a little bit more user friendly, so I would go with this one if I could choose.
Mike, I know you're listening, so pop your head in.
Yes, and tell us if it's on the dashboard.
It should be on the dashboard because everything's being set up where Amir was. He was putting it into SkySlope, so all that stuff should be in SkySlope too. That way you can get to it. Because the buyer's brokers agreement, one of the main things Amir was trying to say is, say you're out of town, out of the country, at who knows where, but we can't get a hold of you. We, as in Ruttenberg itself, trying to get a hold of you to get the buyer's agreement because somebody's asking
Save
for
you
it. Right?
$500.
To save you from a $500 fine, they're able to pop through SkySlope on the back end, pull it off for you. If you haven't been able to upload it to Ruttenberg files yet, then you're still able to get it from SkySlope. So that might be where we're going with that. Where we at?
So
All right, buyer's
here's a
brokers
copy of it. And guys, sorry, we're trying to basically accomplish two things. One of them is go through the buyer's presentation as a buyer, but at the same token, we're trying to address questions and we're trying to go over new procedures that, to be honest, I don't think anyone has it 100% down. So, including NAR and FAR. All right, so Byron, here's a few more things about, basically how the market works and why it's good to use a realtor. And then, guys, for your purpose, just write down a bunch of stuff that is relevant that you think you can do better than other agents, and that you as an agent can do for them that they couldn't do it by themselves. So you're trying to basically add value here. Then in my case, I'm a CRS, so I have a page saying, I use a CRS and not just a regular agent. A GRI, not just a regular agent, and so on. So, any questions about the real estate market? I know it was just a brush through it, but does that make sense how things kind of work?
Makes sense.
Right.
I'm curious. This is something I definitely just can't do on my own. It's a lot better to use an agent.
It can be done.
Yeah.
You can do it. The only problem is, I think we're going to spend probably a few $100,000
Mm-hmm.
in this process, and it may be risky for you to try to do it on your own.
Okay.
I mean, I don't try to stitch myself when I get cut. I usually find someone that knows how to do it.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, it can be done. Rambo did it, right?
Mhm.
So the problem with doing it yourself is going to take longer. It's probably going to cost you more, and it's going to be a lot more painful than it has to be. The idea of us working together and having an agent, it could be another agent. It doesn't have to be me. It has to be an agent that knows what they're doing, so we can save you time, we can save you money, we can get you there,
in time. So I'm not just signing one piece of paper saying, "Here's your house."
No.
No. Okay.
These are the steps we're going to take.
Okay.
So we're done through our qualifying and counseling interview because we already met each other. Now our next step is going to be figuring out the financials. Are you planning on paying cash, or are you going to be seeking financing?
No, I'm gonna get a mortgage.
Okay.
I have a friend of mine. His name's Michael Cochran
Okay.
from CMG Mortgage.
Perfect. That is perfect. Now, let me ask you a question. This is when this starts coming in handy. Byron, what is your living situation now? Are you on a lease?
Yeah, I'm in a lease, but I'm month to month, and I'm living with a roommate.
Okay. How much do you pay a month?
About
If you don't mind
for my half,
Yeah.
The rent alone's $1,800.
Since you're month to month, you can pretty much move whenever it's clever.
Yep.
When would you like to move? Are you trying to move by a certain date, or you're pretty much open?
Probably. Let's see. It's August now. I probably want to be in something definitely before the holidays, so maybe October.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So on top of the form on the left, there's a desired moving date. That's where
And this is
that
in
date
the,
should go into.
this is in the PDF that we gave everybody.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there's a field here for lease expires. Right about halfway through the page, and that's so his month to month, or let's say his lease was going to be up in December. You have that down, so when you're talking to him a week or 2 weeks from now, you're not saying, well, let's go ahead and buy this new construction that is going to be done 9 months from now, and he's not going to have a place to live, or he's going to have to renew a lease or whatever. So you pretty much you want to have all these answers so you can try to overcome not his objections necessarily, but his problems that will start arriving as you've shown him homes and so on. So do you have a mortgage payment in mind for the next home?
Well, I was looking at probably around 3,000,
Okay.
and then maybe I'll find a roommate. I just wanted to
So 3,000
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what you're comfortable with?
approximate.
Okay, cool.
That way, if I do find one, it's cheaper. If not, I buy it myself.
All right, cool. All right, so there's two types of payment when you buy a house. There's the payment you see on Zillow or Realtor.com, and then there's the real payment, which is the one you're going to write a check every month.
Okay.
Those two payments are very different. Usually, when you see a payment on a website, on a builder site, it's going to be your principal and interest,
Okay.
which is the first number on the top there. But that's not going to include your insurance, your property taxes, private mortgage insurance. What are you thinking of putting down?
Probably like
How much?
35,000.
About
that's what I'm
35.
guessing.
Is that what you have set aside for purchase?
Yeah,
All
that's
right,
what I've
cool.
set aside.
So now we write the 35,000 here on the finance part. Were you in the military?
No.
Okay. We'll talk about financing in a little bit. So once we get, all right, so guys, I'm going to stop for a second. Anytime you see a little balloon with red letters on it, that's one of the items on the $1,000 idea form there that I have. You got to get a mortgage calculator, and I would think that everyone has one, but it has to be one that is detailed enough that you can actually get an amortization schedule, not just a payment. So you should be able to plug in amount financed, interest rate, term, and it should give you a payment. And then you should be able to click on something, and it should take you to an amortization schedule where it's going to show out of whatever that payment, how much you're paying in principal and interest out of 2,000, let's say, 1,500 is interest and 500 is principal.
Do you have a specific one that you use?
I have one. I don't know the name of it, but I'll share with you guys later. The idea of having that is, at some point, you're going to compare how much he's paying in rent and how much his mortgage payment is going to be. And at that point, you need to establish his tax benefit out of the principal, out of the interest paid. And for the ones that are just getting started, when you're making a mortgage payment, and since you're buying a house, it's important for you to know. So you're buying a house. You told me you're okay paying $3,000. That $3,000 after tax benefits, amortization, it's going to be somewhat close to what you're paying in rent.
Okay.
So it's going to be your house. You're going to be creating, equity, and then you're going to have a pretty nice write-off. So in a nutshell, and I'm not an accountant, but in a nutshell, I can tell you that if you're paying, let's say, $2,000 a month in mortgage, not your total payment, you're probably going to have somewhere around $1,500 of tax write-off, right? So $1,500 times 12 would be, let me use a calculator for it. Pretty much you're going to be looking at, 18.
17, 18 grand.
I'm nervous, so I can't do that. By so it's 18,000, right? So let's say you make 100 grand a year. By the time you have this tax write-off, you're going to be taxed at 82,000 roughly. Now, this is pretty just simple math. Okay, you have to deal with your accountant on it. But anyway, so you told me you want to have a $3,000 payment. And usually when I'm going through this, I'm writing down on their presentation, the one I'm going to leave with them. $3,000 a month, total monthly payment. Then usually insurance is going to run around $200.
Okay.
Property tax for the price point we're going to be looking at, I think it's probably going to run around $300 as long as we don't have a CDD attached to it.
Okay.
Are you familiar with CDDs?
No, I don't know what a CD is.
All right,
That
so-
would be my next question.
So CDDs it's Community Development District. Okay, you can look at it as a CDD being an association cost. It's built into your property taxes, but it has to do with the neighborhood you live in. So there's CDD and there's HOA with homeowners associations. Are we going to stick to Pinellas as an area that we're searching for?
Yeah, I would like to stay mostly, probably near St. Pete.
Okay, where do you work at now?
I work just north of St. Pete.
Okay, cool.
So
So right, what, Central and Fourth or something around those lines?
it's like 54th and MLK.
So how far are you okay driving? Time wise, 30 minutes, 20
6
minutes,
to under 20.
under 20? All right. So under 20. So at that point, you write down where he works, and then the range that he wants to stay with from work. So you're not asking him, oh, you want to live in this particular neighborhood, or you just kind of getting a broad idea of what they're looking for as far as location. So under 20 minutes. All right. Well, in Pinellas, we don't have CDDs, and pretty much
Okay.
no. As far as I know, I don't think we have any of them. If we decided to go into, let's say, Manatee County, some of the newer communities, or Pasco County, it's going to be pretty much everywhere.
Okay.
It's going to add anywhere from $1,500 to $30,000 a year to your cost.
Okay.
You do get some amenities and stuff out of it, but it's really a personal property. If we're sticking to Pinellas, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Private mortgage insurance. If we're working with $35,000, you're going to have a down payment that is going to most likely be under 20%.
Okay.
So there's private mortgage insurance. You know what that is?
No.
All right. So private mortgage insurance is basically insurance to protect the lender in case you default on the loan.
Okay.
When you put less than 20% down.
Okay.
So it's a kind of a necessary evil in a way. The positive side to it is it allows you to buy a house with 3% down, or 5%, or 7%, or whatever. You don't have to come up with all the way to 20 to buy a house. You can buy it sooner, but you're going to pay PMI all the way up until you get 20% of equity.
Okay.
So it's very normal to buy a house with a little down payment, and then you do some work to it.
Okay.
Time passes, market goes up, and then you refi and take that off later. So I guess we established no CDD, we established that we have no homeowners association. So out of your $3,000 a month on the bottom, you're going to have $200 in taxes, in insurance, $300 in taxes, $125 out of that $3,000 that gets deducted to pay for those items.
Okay.
And then you're left with $23.25 for
Okay.
your actual mortgage payment, your actual principal and interest.
Okay.
Today you can probably say interest rates are somewhere around 6.5%.
Okay.
On a 30-year loan, your cost per thousand is going to be $6.32,
Okay.
which translates to $368,000 financed.
Okay.
Right? Now you're going to put a down payment that I think we decided on 5%. Is that what we're kind of thinking? So you have an $18,000 down payment. So your total purchase price, assuming that we're outside of the flood zone, or not in a CDD community, or not in a house that is very old and it has a $5,000 a year insurance, you're going to be at roughly $386,000.
Okay.
Does that sound about in line with stuff you may look on Realtor.com or Zillow?
Yeah, because I was looking in the 400 range.
Okay, so we're not far from it. Usually what I try to do is I try to overestimate these numbers.
Okay.
So if I tell you 3,000, it's probably going to be a little less than that. But I don't want to paint a picture that is prettier than it should be. And then at this point, we should get you in contact with a lender.
Okay.
So you can get your pre-approval done, so they can tell you the more fine-tuned numbers. The PMI is based on credit, so if you have outstanding credit, it may be only $80 a month.
Okay.
Versus 125. So, any questions at all?
Mhm.
Right.
Excellent credit.
Awesome. Good for you. That'll make my life easier. So financing, you mentioned that you weren't in the military.
No.
So basically, VAs, it's for veterans.
Okay.
0% down, no PMI, outstanding loan, but you have to be a veteran. FHA, it's commonly known as the first-time buyer loan. Conventional is going to be pretty much every other type of loan out there. And then you have investment loans, which is not what we're talking about today.
Not yet.
Not yet. So when you get to this point, it would probably be a good idea for you guys to have this page on your presentation.
He's talking about the attachment that was Michael's. It says how much you're going to sell her. That's that PDF.
Yeah. And the reason this is important or relevant is it will give you an idea of what the down payment will give you and them an idea what down payments are available, down payments are available for what type of loans. But the most important thing at this point is how much you're allowed to get in seller concessions. So, if you look at conventional, it's going to range anywhere from 3 to 9%. FHA is usually 6. Conventional under 15%. On investment 2%, and so on. So this is just like reference that is good for your buyer to have in yourself.
Let me go back on something real quick.
Yep.
So I'm gonna go back on something. We were talking about mortgage calculators. Integrity, we pay for a net sheet calculator. Now that's pretty much for the seller. But our net sheet calculator also has buyer calculators. So there's one that's rent versus buy. There's how much you can afford by an amount, and then there's like the buyer's estimate that we're talking about. Now, like Bernardo just said, we have that calculator for you guys to use. Go to our website, sign up for the calculator, and use it for about everything. But like he said, once you establish that little bit of cost and how much you might be able to do, that then goes straight to the mortgage guys, because that will be the next step. You don't want to tell them, like he said, I could probably afford $3,000 minus $2,300 principal and interest, but the mortgage guys might say it's $2,900 or something like that.
Right.
So you want to get them to give you the exact numbers, because you don't want the buyer to come back and say, hey, you told me this. Well, so be ahead of it and say, this is very much a big estimate. I know plenty of people that I've used this, or you have used this calculator. They're just sitting there talking with their friend about buying a house. Angela's probably done it, where you're sitting there having a glass of wine at happy hour, and then they decide, oh, I'm thinking about buying a house. All right, let's start looking. So then this presentation comes up into play.
Yeah, but the key point is you got to have access to that here. So when you're sitting down having that glass of wine, you're not going to be like, oh, I'll get back with you tomorrow on it. You get it done right then and there. One thing that I forgot to do when we first met is I forgot to hand you my card.
Oh, that's very good.
So there's one for you, and here's two extra ones. So if you know anyone else that is looking to buy or sell, or if you go on an open house or a builder, then you have my card so you can hand it to the agent on site.
All right.
Okay. I would add that to here. If you train them from the beginning, you're getting control of the situation, right? So I just told them, if you walk into an open house or if you walk into a builder, here's my card so you can hand it to them. What happens when you go to a builder? As a buyer, you walk into the builder and you're there for 10 minutes. That salesperson, they want to close you there, or they want to make sure you come back. The best way to get a prospective buyer to come back is by reaching out to their agent, which by him being trained to give your information out to the salesperson, now you just created a link in between you and the builder, which allows them to call you and say, hey, Byron was just here. He looked at model, ABC. I have some extra incentives. If you bring them over the weekend, we have, a free refrigerator and, $20,000 in down payment or whatever. So 2 things come out of that. You get more information about the builder that they probably didn't give to him, the incentives. And then number 2, now the builder is aware that he has an agent, and the builder is aware who his agent is. So if he goes back there on Saturday morning by himself again with his girlfriend, the salesperson, I would say probably 8 or 9 times out of 10, are going to call you up after they leave and say, hey, they were here again. They really like it. And then you should be going back with me on Saturday, by the way. But if you get to the point where they're kind of all over the place, at least they're not completely loose from. So we got the payment down. Any questions? Does this make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
When do we get to look at the house?
Well, we're going to get to that in a second. So when you're buying a house, there's some cost,
Okay.
right? So basically, you're going to have your purchase price. That's your big cost. And then you have your out-of-pocket stuff. Okay. Out-of-pocket is going to be your down payment.
Okay.
So assuming we were spending $386,400 and you were putting 5% down,
Okay.
you would have to bring $18,400 to close.
Okay.
Now, there's 2 other costs that most people call it closing costs, but in reality, it's 2 different animals. There's closing costs, which is cost of purchasing a home, and there's prepaids, which is cost of owning a home. And I'll kind of break it down a little bit. And we're sorry I'm giving you so much information at one time, but this is going to help us in the process. So trust me, it's worth our time. So closing costs, appraisal, inspections, commissions, underwriting fees, points, if you want to buy down your rate.
Okay.
These are usually going to range anywhere from 3 to 6% of the purchase price.
Okay.
Big number. In this case, let's assume we're working with $12,000 in total closing costs. Okay. Then your prepaids, which is your first year of homeowners insurance,
Okay.
which is usually not only a year, it's usually 15 months because they'll have an entire year, and then they're going to set up an escrow account with a cushion of about 3 months in it. So that's going to run around, you can probably say 15 months worth of insurance, and probably 2 to 3 months worth of property taxes. Okay, usually around 2%. So that's another $8,000. So in order to buy this home without getting any contribution from anybody, you need $38,400. That's the bad news,
Okay.
right? You told me you have 35 to work with. Okay. The good news is the market is changing. Sellers are more willing to assist buyers with closing costs because homes are not flying off the shelf like they were a year ago. So it's very likely that we can probably get some kind of contribution from the seller.
Okay.
And if so, let's say we get $5,000. Now we're looking at $33,000 out of pocket versus $38,000.
Okay.
But if you want to be prepared for the worst scenario, I would say try to raise up another $5,000 to add to your 35. Then you're at 40. Then you can pretty much buy any house and not rely on any help.
Okay.
But it's very realistic that we can do it at 35 or even less. Okay. So let's talk about the new the fun stuff now. What are you looking for?
Since I want to maybe have a roommate, I'll probably at least a 3-2.
Okay. You work from home?
Sometimes.
You do? You need an office outside of the 3 bedrooms?
No, I do not.
Gonna work in the office?
I'll just work in the 3rd bedroom. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so 1 bedroom for you, 1
Yeah.
bedroom for the. Got it.
Technically.
Right.
It'll be a everything room.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, sorry to cut you off. There's 2 things I want to know. I want to know what you need. I want to know what you want as well. So you may need 3 bedrooms, but you want 4. So I want to know both. But go ahead.
Definitely want 3 bedrooms.
Okay, so bare minimum 3 bedrooms.
I would like the bathrooms to have toilets.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's important.
Very important.
I think you can add you want to add a shower to it?
Yeah.
All right.
I have a shower as well. Yeah. 3, definitely 2 bathrooms. If at worst, I'd want for 1.5.
So a 1.5 would work
If it was the right house.
for the right price. Gotcha. So here.
That's where I was meant.
All right. So here's where the discovery part of it comes in. Everyone wants a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, or a 4 bedroom, 2 bath. Everyone's, or 99% of the people want a pool. But that's not a deal breaker. So Northeast St. Pete, $386,000 budget.
Not gonna-
Half of the homes, if not all of them, are going to be 1 bathroom.
Right.
They'll have a toilet in it, but the second bath is not going to have a shower. So establishing a realistic list at this point is kind of important. So we have the conversation back and forth about what I just said. So is a garage a must?
Well, I would like one, but
Okay.
not necessary.
Okay. So optional. If you had a pool, that'd be a plus, or
Would be a plus.
would be a plus? Okay.
Top.
Do you have a preference in between block and frame construction?
I don't know the difference.
Okay, that's very important. Ideally, you own a block home because we have hurricane. Not because, I'm not saying,
I always tell the story of the 3 little pigs.
there you go. I'm not saying that the frame home is going to blow away faster than the block home. There's argument for it flexing and all the other stuff that kind of comes into play. They would allow it for it to be just as strong, but it's going to run about 20 to 30% more in insurance. So when we talked about $200 earlier, that could become $260, $300 real quick.
So the wood home would be more,
A little bit
the lower
more.
one.
Yeah. Now,
On the insurance.
if we're trying to stay north of 22nd or south of 22nd, kind of getting closer to the water in downtown, most homes there are frame.
Mhm.
You know, they're 1920s and stuff. If we go, let's say, north of 54th Avenue, pretty much everything from there on going north is going to be block.
Okay.
So that's where your market knowledge kind of comes into play. He lives in St. Pete, he knows all that stuff. You're just basically mentioning again. So now he knows that you know as much as he does, plus all this other stuff you're teaching him. And that's how your retention is going to come into play. Like when I was trying to get your address, your work address, I was trying to get your address not because I necessarily need the exact address, but I wanted to be able to tell you something about something around you where you work. So you'd be like, oh yeah, he knows where I work. If you don't, then shut up. But if you do know where they work, you may want to bring it up and try to use it as leverage. One thing that I didn't say in the beginning, I truly work and I truly think of my job as not being about me, Bernardo, but being about my clients. So none of this sales pitch stuff that we're going through right now, it's to sell or push something on them. The idea of what we're going through here is to make it easier for them to realize who you are if you are the right person for them, and create the trust that you both need to be able to work together. If I don't trust him as a buyer, meaning he's going to go run out and buy a house with somebody else 10 minutes after I spend an hour with him, I don't want to spend a second hour with him. I'm going to move on and go help somebody else that is looking for my help. And the same thing, if he doesn't see the value on me being next to him and helping him with all this stuff, or if he doesn't realize that value, he's not going to sign a buyer's broker agreement. And even before that, he wouldn't stick with me all the way to closing. He would just go with the next agent that smiles and opens a door for him, right? So I kind of lost train of thought of where we were here, but let's see if we can find our place again. All right, so he gave me a general idea of what you're looking for. The next step is for us to start looking at homes. When homes are occupied, it's usually a good idea for us to give them 24 hours notice. Most of the time, we can set up something last minute, but it's ideal to try to plan for it. If we have more than one home to look at the same gathering would be great, right? Usually I try to look at 3, 4, 5, maybe the first time around that we go out. And then if we don't find it there, which is kind of rare, most people don't find it on the first round, then we can set up as many as needed. It could be 1, could be 2, or whatever. My job is not to sell your house. My job is to facilitate the process of you getting from here into the day you get your keys. So when we go look at homes, now this is Bernardo saying, I'm not saying you should do it this way, it's entirely up to you. I'm going back to my little speech here. I'm not gonna open the door and say, Byron, look how beautiful this kitchen is. Look how wonderful this is, and so on. You don't need me for that. You'll know if you like it or you don't. What you need me for is, if there's a crack on the sidewall that we can stick our hand through it, do we need to put an offer on? Do we need to pay an inspector $500 to come tell us 2 weeks from now that the home has structural damage? That you don't have a budget to fix? We don't, right? So my job is to look for the flaws. Your job is to tell me what you like and what you don't like. And it's more important for you to tell me what you don't like than it is for you to tell me what you like. Because that way I can kind of look at homes through your eyes as I'm selecting them on MLS or whatever I'm looking for homes for you. Does that make sense? All right, cool. So we go out, we look at houses, 1, 2, 3, 10, whatever. We get to the point where we have a budget put together, we have a list of criteria. We go look at homes, we have a home. And for sake of this example here, let's say that the listing price of this particular home that Byron liked is $379,000. As we were going through the house, I was writing down things such as it's going to need paint, it's going to need flooring, it's going to need a new air conditioning. This is 2023 or 24, and the AC was put on in 94. So I'm trying to jog all the notes in my MLS sheet. So 5 days later or 10 days later, when he decides to put an offer, if it takes that long, I still remember, the pluses and minuses of that particular property. So at this point, let's say that we're sitting at this home that is listed at $379,000, and you tell me, I love it, I want it, right? So what I usually tell people is, when we get to that point, I'm going to run back to the office and I'm going to run numbers on it so we can figure out how much the house is truly worth. We know the seller is looking for $379,900. Assuming that that's priced right, we shouldn't be too far off from it, but I still need to run numbers on it, right? So I go back to the office, he goes back home, and then I'll call him an hour later. All right, Byron, I ran numbers on the house, and they did an outstanding job pricing it. I did the CMA, and I came up with 378, 532. So basically, we're right there. 380 is kind of the ballpark. Now, remember when we were walking through it, we established AC was 27 years old, I think we said. So it's broken already. It's just blowing cold air. I don't know how, but it's broken. It's going to need to be replaced.
Okay.
And the second you buy this house, that's your problem. So we need to take that in consideration now. And then you're going to have to paint it. I mean, you may not need to do it right away, but eventually you're going to have to do it just to waterproof the house and so on. So I think it's fair for us to take that in consideration there. So in an ideal scenario, we would take the asking price, we put next to the true CMA or the true value of it they established with the CMA, and then we would try to discount, the flaws, the AC, the paint, to come up with a ballpark, offer number, which in this case would be $368,000. So when we get to this point, Byron, we have to understand why they're selling. We have to understand how you're buying it. We have to take in consideration all the items that are going to become a problem at inspections or thereafter. So we can try to put an offer that is going to address their needs and your needs. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere. If we try to address your needs only and not the seller's needs, our offer is going to be too aggressive or too low. If we try to get too aggressive because you said you love the house, you're going to overpay and then you're going to have all kinds of headaches afterwards. So we have to find a balance somewhere in between the two. So in this particular case, this home was listed yesterday. We have been driving around and looking at properties. We haven't seen anything under 400 that was as nice as this one. So there's a pretty high likelihood that this is going to sell quickly, and it's probably going to sell pretty close to what asking price is. Now, I'm saying that this is an opinion. Based on paper, we should offer 368. But if there is one house in this particular zip code that he's looking at, it's the first one under 400 and we like everything about it, then if you think it's worth 379, we need to offer 379 to get it. Or we need to offer 368 to offset for the deficiencies. Or we may decide to say, you know what, the AC is working for now. You're going to get some money at Christmas from your company or whatever. Let's go ahead and ask for some closing costs so we can get you in the house with less money out of pocket. You can set the money aside for the AC later. And we'll put an offer at, let's say, $379, asking for $10,000 in closing costs. And then we'll ask the seller to pay the buyer's agent commission. Does that sound fair?
Sounds fair.
All right. So we came up with a sale price. We came up with a strategy of how we're going to offer it. Then on my buyer's presentation, I have the entire contract. And I usually tell people, I'm like, if you have nothing better to do in life, or if you really like to read all 12 pages. If you don't have that time, when we get to the point of writing an offer, we'll make sure we're going through all the important items and make sure that we're on the same page about what we're offering. The standard contract has 13 pages. I don't think I ever wrote a contract with less than 15, maybe 16 pages. There will be addendums we're going to add to it to protect your deposit, to address inspections, to address lead paint, depending on how old the house is. So this is just the body of the essential contract. Any questions for?
I don't think so.
All right. So now we're stepping away from buyer for a second. This is a good time to talk about the buyer's agreement, the compensation agreement. And keyword here is seller to buyer broker. That's what Mike is looking for. That's what our office is looking for. That's what's going to keep us out of trouble. Basically, what you're doing is you're asking the seller to pay Rothenberg a commission. You're not asking the listing agent to pay us a commission. Whatever the commission is, whatever number you think is that you want to ask for, that's entirely up to you. I would say the more you bring to the table, the more you should get compensated. If you can get away with getting compensated as much as someone that has been doing it for a long time and you just got in the business yesterday, all power to you. Now this is going to be relevant. That up until about a month ago, if you had 1 day in real estate or me with 23 years, I brought a buyer to the house, we got paid the same amount of money. The buyer's presentation is going to allow you to get to this point. If you just take the phone call and say, hey, Byron, what are you looking for? 3-bed and 2-bed, St. Pete. And you say, all right, give me your email. I'm going to send you some properties and we'll figure out a date to meet. He's not going to sign a form saying that he's going to pay you $12,000 for that process. Would you?
I guess not.
All right. Do you think that after we spend,
Yeah, I'm broke.
he got $35,000?
That's all I got.
That's what I got. All right. So now this is just me suggesting one way to do it. There's 1,000 ways to do this. The way I've been doing it for the last 3 weeks, and it has worked so far, we got 3 under contract, 1 a week, using this process. We made an offer based on all the general stuff that we went through here without mixing the commission into it. So this is about buying. That's what we're working on right now. Then when it came to be about me and how I get compensated, we had already signed a buyer's agreement. On the buyer's agreement that we signed, that I presented to him, I put in there that I was going to get compensated 3%. And I told him, I said, we're going to try to work this 3% into the negotiations with the seller. You can put 1%, 12%, whatever you want to do. That's what I did on this particular one that is under contract. Through negotiations with the seller only agreed to 2.5. So I was okay with that. I thought it was fair. I didn't want him to lose the house over it. We're under contract. We have a sales contract, and the sales contract, there's a seller's contribution towards buyer's closing cost. There is also a compensation agreement signed between the seller and us for a particular dollar amount. So there's 3 forms basically there in this particular. There's addendums and so on. That's one way to do it. You can also do it where you ask for the seller contribution in the sales contract as part of your seller contribution towards buyer's closing costs, and then you can have the buyer pay for it. It's really entirely, it's up to you guys how you want to do it. I think this is probably a little bit cleaner way to do it. Mike may have some input on this as well. There was some back and forth in between us and some attorneys, and how can you collect the commission if you put it all towards closing costs, bundle with buyer's closing costs for their closing costs. So it would be nice to separate it if you can. The main point is it has to be transparent. You have to know, the buyer has to know, the seller has to know, everybody has to be on the same page about it. Don't try to sneak it in anywhere. Don't get creative because you're probably going to get in trouble with it.
I thought he mentioned just to do it broker to broker, and then the broker pays the.
Broker to broker. That's the way not to do it.
That's the way they don't want it.
Yeah, broker to brokers is where the problems could come up. Because that's the way we used to do. I used to go and take a listing as Rothenberg, and then as Rothenberg, I used to offer, KW X%.
Right.
That's how they want us to shift from that to either the buyer pays or the seller pays, but not cooperating between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if I have agreement with the buyer that will pay me 3%, and I am getting compensated also from the seller 2%, can I get both?
You cannot, because the agreement that you have with the buyer. Okay, so your buyer broker's agreement, which is not this form. It's
Right,
It's give me a second. Do we know if they heard the question on Zoom?
I'm not
The
sure.
maximum you can get is what's on the buyer broker agreement.
Sorry, I'm trying to go back to.
Mike picks up, Mike would reiterate.
So whatever, this is the buyer broker's agreement.
right.
And if you use this form, or if you use the one from the board, it's a separate subject. Either one of the forms is going to have how much you're expecting to get compensated, and whatever number is there is the max you can get it.
So if whatever is on buyer's agreement, that's the maximum. you
So
can
so
pay.
let's put a regular seller aside. Let's say you go into Lennar or D.R. Horton or whatever building, and they pay you 3%, and because it's Christmas and they're having a hard time selling that particular home, they're going to give you an extra $5,000 as a bonus. You cannot take the $5,000 You cannot go under contract and get the 5,000 unless you get the buyer's agreement re-signed with the buyer by telling the buyer, listen, because I sell, 50 homes a year with them, I get a bonus, and my bonus is X. So we're going to modify to 3% plus 5,000 on this particular reason.
Another scenario, if I'm a listing agent,
Mhm.
I have this great listing, but I have you over there looking for a house and you happen to like my listing. Can I get both?
Yeah, you're listening. I mean, whatever you have on your listing agreement.
So I get, and plus I get what you as a buyer's agent are paying me, as a buyer paying me, because you're my buyer now. I have you as a buyer and I have her as a listing agent, seller.
You know, typically don't
yeah.
discount that.
So
Yeah.
no double dipping?
No,
No double.
No.
they're avoiding the double dipping, my understanding.
Yeah, so the listing agreement creates the relationship in between the seller and yourself. The buyer's coming into a relationship that has been created already, right?
Right.
So the buyer's agent agreement at that point, you already know what commission is on the table, right?
Right.
So you're probably gonna tell the buyer, hey, listen, I'm already getting compensated by the seller. And the compensation that I'll get for your side of the transaction, for the buyer's side of the transaction, is, I don't know, blue percent. Let's use color now, so we'll throw everybody off. You already know that number, so you just create the buyer's agreement just as a document. So it's documented that the buyer is aware that you're getting X percent for the buyer representation part, and then X percent from the seller. That's in between you and the seller. But the seller is going to pay the whole thing, so the buyer is aware that they're not coming out of pocket for it.
Okay.
Okay.
Because the seller agreement says I'll get 4% if I am selling in buyer agent, and yet my buyer's agreement, broker agreement says 3%, so I'm gonna get 4%, right?
Correct. Well,
Okay. I'll adjust this buyer agreement to 4, right?
right. I mean, the idea behind all of this, not what we're going through right now, but this whole thing we're going through is transparency, right? They're saying that there's not enough transparency, and they're saying that we're picking homes versus other homes because of whatever reasons they came up with. The last thing we want to do is have situations where now the public is getting harmed by these changes. And if a commission was X before, and now by double dipping, for lack of a better term, which is not a good way to do it, you're going to increase that commission to X plus, we're not really doing a service. So I wouldn't change it. The way you did it before, you get paid as a buyer for a buyer's commission, then that's what you get. If you're holding both hats, then you get paid for both hats, but not 3 times, basically.
And if I sign this buyer agreement and set 0, I'm not gonna charge my buyer.
You're not going to get a penny. Even if the builder wants to give you $1 million commission, you can get it. So whatever is on the agreement is the top, the max you can get.
But
You can modify.
I don't.
Well, yeah, but I mean, but if it's 0, it's 0.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't get modified, you go under contract, then you're gonna have to ask for it to be backdated, which is not legal. So yeah, no, you cannot get compensated if it was 0.
But how do I know what I'm gonna get from the seller?
That's the trick. So if your time is worth X percent, that's the number they should go here, whatever that number is. So and whatever number your buyer is gonna be okay signing. But if you put a number that's too high, they're probably not gonna go for it.
So basically, if I just to work with you, put 0 until I find out from the other side and I do modification.
It can be done, it's not the best way to
do
do
a
it.
modification.
But most of the buyers are gonna be scared, hey, I'm gonna pay you whatever, I'm not gonna pay, so far we were not paying you, no buyers were paying commission, now we have to pay you and seller was supposed to pay.
But that's, every agent's gonna have to do it the same way. So the idea of doing this buyer's presentation is for you to have enough strength as an agent to be able to say, hey, this is what I offer. I offer you an hour of my life before we even go anywhere. And all this knowledge that I gather by studying and doing it, that most people are not, sometimes they know more than I do, but they don't say it. So they lose the buyer to me because I went in there and I took the time telling them. That's where this is important. The buyer's broker agreement is just a form that you're gonna have to sign. There's nothing to it. You put a number, you put a signature, you're done. Getting someone to agree to sign it is where the trick is. And that's where being a professional buyer's agent is important. You don't walk into a listing presentation without knowing anything about the house. You don't take a listing over the phone. We never. Has anyone here taken a listing over the phone? That's impossible, right? But we always. I mean, I have done it maybe for the first 6 months in the business. I did it. I don't take people out until I see their faces. You know, I have not put in a single person in a house before they sell with me for an hour. If they're not willing to sit with me for an hour, I'm not taking them around. They're not serious about it. You know.
Well,
One
you
thing
can
I'm
put
here,
the 3%, but then if they only wanna, or your seller is only going to pay 2 or 2.5, you do a modification.
I wouldn't put 0 though. I think putting 0, it's gonna set you up for failure.
You know, and Amir has said in the past, you know, in classes we've done, we're doing the workshops. And by the way, they're every two weeks, like there's a workshop. So all these questions, come here and talk to Amir and whomever's teaching the class that day. But, you know, if the compensation agreement, the seller's only offering 1.5% and the buyer's only able to afford 0.5%, you know what I mean? Or 2.5 and 1, whatever you want to call it. The compensation, you know, then you might have to look at the buyer and say, this might not be the house for you. And then you go to where they can afford.
Yeah,
But that's where your negotiation comes in as a buyer's broker.
But the conversation has to be had before you drive them around, before they spend their time with you. Because if they're not willing to pay whatever you're asking for, and you're not willing to work for less than whatever you're asking for, that relationship shouldn't start beyond that first initial conversation. But if you have that conversation over the phone, it's very likely it's not going to get anywhere ever. So this thing, if you agree with me or you disagree with me, this time it's an investment you're making to keep a buyer or to get a buyer. That's where you go.
In my understanding from the calls and different things too, if we have a buyer broker agreement with somebody, let's just throw the number 2.5%. And the seller, I mean, we can write it in the contract. You write in the contract what their offer is, if there's seller's concessions, and if they'll pay, you know, the 2.5%. And if they agree based on the contract you come to, it's not costing your buyers anything because that's, I mean, you'll know during the contract and negotiation whether it's gonna work or not. But they did recommend on the calls, you gotta have a number on there, because if you don't have a number on there, and the seller, yeah, they can take your Friday, they could turn around and buy the house and you don't get paid. Because your agreement says 0. And that's why they say protect yourself with a number.
And even if you have an agreement that says 0, and you write on the contract, seller to pay X for buyer's closing costs, seller to pay, you know, and part of that is your compensation. Or if you write in there, seller to pay for X in closing costs plus seller to pay buyer's broker commission and whatever,
Right.
then whatever becomes 0 because the buyer's agreement was 0. So even if the seller's willing to do it, the buyer's signing the contract, everybody's on the same page, if the form that you were supposed to have in him before you showed him the house, before you showed it, say something else, it has to be amended. Otherwise, that 2% or 3% or whatever that number is just goes up in the sky. It doesn't come back to you. Now imagine if you're working, I usually work with 16 to 20 buyers at a time. There is no way I'm going to remember if that particular buyer had a 0 or a 1 or a 12 or whatever the number is. It has to be a system. You have to do it the same way every time, just like this presentation. If you cut half of it with one buyer and you do the full one with the next, you're never going to know where the flaws are and you're never going to be able to make it better. So you have to like kind of follow up step by step and try to, you know, keep everything the same.
I have to go see Amir.
I know it's not fun. I don't agree or disagree.
I have a question about the modification. So I can see that getting really sticky. If you make an offer and you modify the buyer broker agreement, there, from what I just saw, there's no place that says like buyer, like this is the First Amendment or Second Amendment.
No, you just cross it and you put whatever number and you have an initial to it next to it.
Okay, so if you're making, I mean, if we're not in the market like it was before, where you know, sometimes write 10 or 15 offers and they might not
Unfortunately,
get
yeah.
accepted.
Right.
So if they're doing that and you modify it according to, like, it doesn't seem like there's any thread to go back and see which was the last amendment.
Okay, so this is something that we have to get you know, the upper management's blessing on it. But I'm gonna say it just for sake of answering your question, and I think this is how it's going to really play out. I think when you get to the point where you're writing an offer on a property for someone, you got to the point where there's trust already in place, right? When there's trust in place, I think there's a little bit of lenience in between what we're trying to do, right? So it's easier for you to tell someone, hey, here's a buyer's broker agreement at 3%, and you have created trust with them and say, hey, if they only, if we can negotiate that 3 or 2 or whatever, and I hate this not being able to use a number, but not for sake of commission, but for sake of being able to say X, Y, or whatever. You should be able to tell them, hey, this is conditional on the seller accepting. If they don't, if they're not willing to pay this and you don't have the money, we're going nowhere. So
Right.
we'll have to amend it no matter what.
But you would recommend, when would you recommend making the amendment? When the offer is
I would do the
presented,
amendment.
or once it's,
No, I would write the offer, and I would write the amendment. If you DocuSign and stuff over to them, I would have it on the same envelope. That way, you have a paper trail that your agreement was X, your agreement became X minus whatever, and it's all documented on DocuSign or whatever electronic signatures that it was done at the time of contract, not after. So basically, you're making it conditional. The contract is conditional to that.
and I believe that Amir mentioned like writing that in there, that it's conditional upon the seller compensating buyer to, like that you'd have the seller to buyer's
I have to
broker
go back.
agreement, and then you'd also have that in the contract.
It can be done various ways. I mean, transparency is basically what they're trying to achieve first is transparency, and they're trying to stop cooperation between brokers. That's the two main things as far as I know. So if you keep that in mind when you're writing it, and you're being transparent to the buyer, to the seller, to everybody, I think you could probably consider yourself safe. Follow whatever rules they're telling us to do, and then always look at it from that angle. Is this transparent enough? I think you're going to be safe. But how you're going to write it really is going to depend on the negotiation. I had one out of the 3 that we wrote in the last 3 weeks of the new rule. One of them, the agent said the commission is this, so I just wrote the commission. It was lower than what I had on my buyer's broker agreement, but I was okay with it.
Right.
So I just wrote that on the compensation, and I didn't negotiate commissions. I negotiated a purchase of a home with seller contribution towards buyer's closing costs for prepaids, for that kind of stuff.
But so you didn't get that from the listing agent?
No.
You
Oh, the number?
no,
The compensation agreement.
The
No, I put it
compensation.
together. Yeah. So the compensation agreement, you put Charles Rothenberg Realty, prospective buyer, seller actually, agrees to pay seller to broker key part X.
So when, in some of the classes, it had been suggested that when you were maybe setting up a showing appointment or something of that nature, you would ask them to send any of the compensation information. So
We're trying to figure out where we're going to go with all this stuff.
Okay.
It's can you do it? Yeah. I mean, does it?
Because
It could
it
backfire.
would be covering you to know that you would have that you could go back to your buyer and say, it looks like the seller is willing to pay me,
Well,
whatever on your behalf. Now, I know that it's all negotiable because
and I think that's where the biggest change is, right? So before we went on the MLS, there was a number there, and that's the number you expected to get paid. Simple.
Right.
Now we have to show the property, we have to do the CMA, do all that kind of stuff, and we have to ask an uncomfortable question if you find it uncomfortable. I don't think it's uncomfortable. You're working hard, you gotta get paid. So you're asking the seller, the listing agent, does the seller have any funds allocated to the buyer's agent commission?
Right.
And so far, everyone that I asked has said yes.
Right.
Some of them didn't say how much. Some of them upfront said it's whatever. And then you're gonna have to kind of go. Let's say they say yes, there is, and it's X, and X is a number that you think is fair. Then you just write the seller's broker compensation agreement, or the compensation agreement to buyer's broker, with that number in it, and you send your contract, your addendums, and that form, so they all get signed by the seller at the same time.
Okay. Now, and this may be a touchy subject, and I know we're not, or at least my understanding is we're not 100% sure how any of this is gonna be shown maybe after the property closes, because it's making it difficult to do a true CMA, in my opinion. Because you can't go back and say, this seller listed at this, they sold at this, they provided this much in seller concessions, and they paid their cooperating broker 2.5%.
Right.
And I know that that's the gist, they don't want you to be able to compare that, but when you're truly doing a CMA,
If there's a seller
It's-
that paid and there's a seller that didn't pay,
that makes a difference.
yeah, well,
And-
if it's, I don't know if the seller contributions in general, not the offer contribution, but the actual contribution at closing, I think are still gonna be part of our records.
Right. But
Meaning
it'll
if they
probably
pay
be
$5
under
grand in
just
closing costs,
seller
it'll show.
concessions, like it.
Well, they're
it is
taking the
now.
seller concession fields out, right?
Right, now they are.
So
But
that's
you know
gonna
how
be
we
gone.
had before where it said, buyer or seller contribution to closing costs.
Right, I'm assuming that post-closing information will be available as one number.
Right.
Now,
So
what
we
number is
still
gonna
won't
go
really
there?
be able to-
Is that just the stuff that went to the buyer's closing cost? Or is the buyer's closing cost plus the buyer's broker? I don't know the answer to that. We'll have to call David at the board and ask.
Yeah, I would just.
I don't think he knows either. I mean,
It doesn't seem
It's-
like
we're way
anybody
too early
really
to
knows
even
how
know.
it's gonna
Yeah.
be.
No,
yet,
I would just do a blanket percentage and just estimate a plus or minus.
Right,
Just do that. You want to estimate it at 6, fine, estimate it at 6. You want to estimate it at 4, estimate it at 4. Have your plus or minus. Just make the estimate and stick with it. But make sure when you're doing that estimate, you're telling the people, okay, it could be here and here. You got to tell them the what ifs.
right,
Then that way you're not, well, this just happened. You already answered that question way ahead of time. So be ahead of all the questions, but have a reasoning behind, which you would be in your buyer's stuff, like have a reasoning behind why you're doing it at this rate. Well, the national average is 4.45.
I wouldn't use
You know,
that.
You got to have a reason behind your own thing, because it's your
but
person.
that's where it helped previously, because you actually had the numbers
Well,
to show.
the-
You could say that in this particular instance,
The way it works previously, and I'm sorry to cut you off.
I know.
We sat down with a
previously.
buyer and we told the buyer they didn't have to pay us. That's how it worked, because the seller was paying, right? That's how it worked. So
Yeah.
when I had this presentation done a month ago or 6-8 weeks ago, down payment, closing costs, prepaids, that was all solely buyer related. We always thought of commissions being a seller expense. I still think it should be, but that's my personal opinion. That's not how the world works anymore. And me getting frustrated and kicking and screaming about it is just going to make it worse. All we need to do is everything changed, right? So now we need to basically change with it. And if we don't change, if we try to do the old way, we're going to be ran out of business. Basically, as an agent, you're not going to be able to do enough business to survive. So
And I totally understand that. I'm just saying that when you do, because I always, before I write an offer, do exactly what you said. Give me a few minutes to run some numbers, make sure that, they've got it priced appropriately, do the same thing about, what it's gonna need. But it doesn't give you an opportunity when you're doing a CMA anymore to know, included in that price, even on the solds, if there were, we take it for granted because
that's going to be
there usually was,
a
but
bigger problem for appraisers
yes.
more than it is to
and-
us.
And side note, we have the appraisal class with kind of a market analysis theme that will be coming soon. So
Okay,
it's probably best to just
Yeah.
get off that roundabout turn.
okay.
I honestly think that we're going to have seller concessions post closing showing on MLS. So that's the number you have to work with.
And it'll be good to know what the
Yeah.
appraiser says. So,
Right.
because
Eventually-
how are they
The
doing it?
appraisers I've spoken to, they're
We
on
have John
different pages.
John with Opteon is going to be in here. We're going to do something similar because we're going to go through old school of I'll pop out a market analysis of how we did it, and then how he used to say. But then he's going to have some changes. Most of the class will be on the appraisal part, but he'll say he's going to kind of teach you how to add this to your repertoire or don't do this anymore. You know what I mean?
When
Because
is that class?
it's not out yet. I got to talk. Barcelo, I haven't seen him lately, so I got to talk to him.
So let's go back to our presentation here so we can get through it. And next time we do it,
Hold on,
we'll be a little bit better.
Let's answer
at it.
one question on this here. you, Benita. Go ahead and I gotta unmute you. Oh, you're unmuted now. Okay, go ahead.
Hear me all right?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Seems like buyers and sellers are under the impression that the seller is always paid for the commission. So if I get a listing and hopefully I get the buyer as well, and the buyer and the seller both agree to split the commission, how's that handled?
You said that you got a listing that the seller's willing to pay the buyer's agent commission, is that what you said?
I said it seems like the buyers and the sellers, with all this changes are going on. They're coming back with, well, I was always under the impression that the seller has always been the one to pay the commission. Well, now something comes up, but say I have a listing and I bring in a buyer and they'll say, well, how about if we split the commission? I'm accustomed to the 6%, and if the seller's willing to pay 3% and the buyer's willing to pay 3%, how would I move forward with that?
All right, so how about if we looked at the commission as a marketing expense instead of a true commission, right? So you have, when you get a house listed, if on the new scenario now, you can say my fees are X, and we're not going to offer a buyer's broker a single dollar, right? The likelihood of that sales price or asking price being the same as if you were offering a buyer's broker commission, it's probably 100%. So meaning what I'm saying is, you're gonna list a house at $400,000, you can tell the seller, hey, we'll list it at $400,000 and we pay X to the listing agent, for myself to promote it, and we're gonna offer X to the buyer's agent so we can work with more buyers that may not be able to afford their buyer's broker commission, right? And let's say hypothetically, it's $400,000. If we have the same conversation with that seller and say, well, we're not going to compensate the buyer's broker, do you think the seller is going to lower the asking price according to whatever dollar amount?
I have no idea.
Probably not. Probably not. So as listing agents, one of the biggest tools we always had was the MLS. The second the MLS becomes just a place to place pictures and stuff and somewhat relevant information, only, it's I don't know, it's questionable. I got to be careful with I don't want to get into my opinion on what is the right way to do it. The conversation with a seller, Benita, should be, we probably should offer commissions, or we should offer a concession, or if we're not, then we need to price accordingly, because otherwise we're just charging the buyer more than it really is worth it, I guess. Does that answer your question? Did I answer your question at all?
I'm still a little confused about it.
Yeah, right.
I guess, but if I've got both of them, if I've got the listing
Mhm.
and I'm bringing in the buyer, and they decide, hey, for 6%, which is what I'm accustomed to, if they're willing to split it,
That's all part of the negotiation of the contract. So yeah, that's perfectly fine.
okay, but how does it have to be written up?
So you're going to have a buyer's agreement at 3% on your scenario, and you're going to have a
Right.
listing agreement getting compensated 3% from the seller.
That's it.
And that's it. And the buyer's going to bring down payment, closing costs, plus your 3%, and then the seller's going to take 3% off their proceeds. And that's it.
Oh, so why is it that people are saying no double dipping? I mean, I don't consider that double dipping. Maybe that's just a different way of looking at it. I don't know.
No, I think the question on double dipping was if you could keep the 6 and then add another whatever percent to the buyer side.
Oh, I got it.
Which
okay.
technically you can. You shouldn't, but you can, I guess.
No, I get it now. It led me to believe that we would not be able to ask, for that example, 3 for the buyer, 3 for the seller.
Well, we're going to have to work all these things out as we progress into the new system. Really, it's. I don't think anyone has a clear answer on all of it yet.
Let's get back.
Okay, all right.
So how much time do we have?
15.
All right. So let's try to wrap this up, and the next time around we can try to be a little bit more stick to the plan. So Byron, when we get to we get your offer accepted.
Okay.
We're under contract. Our first step after that is going to be we got to send our earnest money deposit in, our escrow deposit. That's going to get sent to the title company.
Okay.
that is closing the transaction 9 times out of 10.
The integrity title.
The integrity title. Yeah. So that's another thing that people don't realize as a buyer, as a buyer's agent, you can request for the title company to be the title company you trust. And you can ask for it to be paid by the seller or paid by the buyer. I ask all the time. 90% of the time I don't get it. But if I think it's relevant, like sometimes you're dealing with an agent that just got started, they don't really have a relationship with a title company, then you can say, hey, I got a great relationship with Integrity Title. Why don't we go there? If you like them, we can use them from their fold. I mean, it's all negotiable, again. On the end of the day, you want to make sure that whatever you're negotiating is to your buyer's best interest. Now, do we want to throw that in there if there's multiple offers on the table? Oh, no. You're not going to argue with title companies. You're going to try to get your answer right. I mean, there's the time and the place for it.
Or a home warranty.
Or a home warranty, or 5 days pre-closing occupancy. I mean, no one's going to go for it. But anyways, so I'm not holding the money. The listing agent is not holding the money. The closing agent will. When we get to closing, let's say we decide there's no magic number for deposits. Usually 1%, but we can offer $500 or 50 grand. It doesn't really matter. It's part of how much strength we want to put in your offer. So if there's 5 offers, and I was able to figure out as an agent by talking to the listing agent that all 5 are FHA, and we are FHA, most FHA buyers are going to put 1,000, 2,000. We put 5,000. Our offer goes up on the list. So does it change really anything on your side? Risk, maybe by a little bit, but in 23 years, I only lost 1 deposit, and we did it because they deserve to lose it. So chances of you losing yours are pretty slim if we stick to the terms of the contract. So as long as we get our paperwork to the lender on time, as long as we get our inspections on time, and as long as you don't change your mind, 5 days before closing, chances of you losing the deposit are pretty small. So let's say we send 5 grand in as a deposit, and we figure out you're going to need 38,000, total. There's $5,000 there. You can save the balance in between now and closing, and then all you bring is the balance of the 38,000 minus the 5. Very important to be very careful when it comes time to wire that money to the title company. You're probably going to get an encrypted email from them and so on, but make sure you call them. There's been some fraud going on, so the last thing we need is you wiring money, to the wrong person. After that, we go into inspections. This is probably where a lot of concern comes into play, especially if we're going to be looking at older homes, probably 50s, 60s, 70s. We're going to try to pre-qualify the home prior to putting an offer on. So if we look at a house that is perfect, but it needs a roof, and it needs painting, and it needs an air conditioning and a new kitchen, and it needs closing cost assistance, likelihood of us being able to negotiate all of that into the actual purchase, it's pretty small. So that may not be the right house for you. If you want to buy a rehab that needs 50 grand worth of work, and all we have to work with total is 38, I think that may not be the right house. Here's another $1,000 deal. When I talk to buyers about inspections, I try to set the right expectations. There is no perfect home. You can go into a 2023 build or a 1969 and have the same results. Sometimes people think, newer homes are better than older homes. Not necessarily. The owners of the home are going to dictate how much work they're going to need or not. We do inspections of 1950s homes that sometimes have no issues at all. And then 2 days later, you're doing an inspection on a 5-year-old home that has a laundry list this big. So the idea here is to introduce the problem to them before it comes up, and then introduce the solution as well. So when there is a problem, we can say, remember when we first sat down that we talked about, roofs have leaks and electrical issues and so on. It's going to come up. We'll figure out a way to work it. If we can't work it, we can always call it a day and go find another one. Okay. Get a good inspector out of your closing costs. There are some things that are going to have a lot of value. This is one of them. You can get a guy for $150 to go over the house with a golf club and tap on the baseboards, or you can spend $300 to $500 to get a proper inspection done. I would go with the best inspector that you can afford. If you don't have one that you normally use or you never use one, so here's a list of the guys I use: Google, Yellow Pages, whatever other places you can find them. There'll be plenty of them qualified out there. They're going to check structural issues, electrical, plumbing, built-in appliances, safety hazards, miscellaneous, the doors they're not opening properly, and so on. The idea is we need to make sure you know all of this before it's your home. Once you sign your paperwork and you get the keys, all these expenses become yours. So we want to know what they are ahead of time. Termites, also very important. In Florida, we have had them or will have them. So sometimes you get to inspections and the house has termites. That can be a blessing because now we can negotiate that to be treated prior to closing, and you have a warranty and hopefully a service from there forward. Any questions? All right. So from now forward, 90% of the stuff you're going to deal with is going to be directly with the mortgage company and directly with the title company. The better relationship you have with the mortgage person that is helping you, in our case here, we have Michael to offer. Basically, all these steps can be kind of crossed prior to you being under contract. So your homeowner's application, your mortgage application, your credit, your appraisal. Appraisal is probably going to be done, shortly after inspections. But you can pretty much be 100% approved with all, the property-related things aside. So that's where getting a pre-approval, not just a pre-qualification, is important. And then at that point, that's where I hand them who my preferred lender is. One thing that I always tell my buyers too is I don't make $1 out of anything that I refer to them, and I honestly don't. So home warranties. You want to get a home warranty? Great. I get $75 in the mail. I'll send it to you. We'll go out for a beer, or I'll send it to you so you can go out to dinner with your wife or whatever. As a principle, I would never take $1 from a home inspector, an electrician, a mortgage company, a title company. That way, you can say it to them, here, this is who I trust. And to be honest, 99% of my clients go with the people that I tell them to go with. But I can step back at any point and say, if you don't like them, you're welcome to go wherever you want to go. There's no interest for me. The only interest that I have in giving you these people is I know they do it right, and I know they'll make these payments for you. And that's basically it. So I'm trying to speed up so we don't go over the allowed time. All right. So then, before you leave, then just get as much information as you can to fill this up as much as possible. Obviously, there are some things that are not relevant, but you want to make sure that if they have pets, if they have a pit bull, and they're looking at townhomes, and most New York associations don't allow whatever breeds of dogs, you may not want to waste their time looking at it. Most people don't detach from their dogs, so that's the kind of important stuff. If they have kids, going into high school, and they want to go to a public high school, and they want an A-rated school, well, looking in St. Pete may not be the right place. They may have to go to Palm Harbor. So whatever. I mean, that kind of information. The idea is you shouldn't ask your buyer this question again for any of the items that are listed here because you don't remember. It's okay to ask it. It's okay to ask and say, buyer, can we go to no bathrooms instead of 1.5? Just because the budget is small. But
I need a mirror. Nothing.
But it should be professional enough for you to not go back to the buyer and say, I'm sorry, I forgot what you said, basically.
Never seen a 3-0.
3-0.
Yeah.
They're out there.
They are.
It might be in the garage.
Yeah, back in the REO's days.
No bathroom.
Concrete down the yeah, there was no toilets, no sinks, and there was concrete closing up the drain. So
Oh
yeah,
my word.
that'll be a 3-0. So that's basically it. This was and then there's some additional pages. I made it.
Did you really? You had all the time.
Over time.
Well, I spent probably the first 6 months or a year trying to come up with all the forms. I have seller forms and all that stuff when I got into business.
Yes.
And to be 100% honest with you, my wife found on this page, on the one that has the home inspector, And my reference of where to look for a home inspector was on the yellow pages.
Yeah.
And then she's like, when was this last time you saw yellow pages? I'm like, back in the early 2000s they had them. So there's a lot of stuff that I should be updating. To be 100% honest, the page that we're in right now, that's the most important in my opinion. And you know, you can buy a pencil and pay $1 for it and write with it, and that's all that pencil is worth it, right? Or you can get a pencil and you can draw a masterpiece with it and sell it for $100,000. This here is the pencil. How are you gonna use it? If you're gonna just print a bunch of paper and hand it to them and say, read it, you're wasting your time and you're wasting paper. Nobody's gonna read it. You can write jokes on the middle of the stuff and no one is ever gonna notice because they don't read it. I had, in 23 years, I had 2 people say that they actually took the time and read, you know, the entire thing. One of them was nice enough to highlight all my misspells, which was awesome. But most people don't read it. No one has time to sit around and read what other people wrote. You know, so I guess going back to the whole concept here is, if you don't take the time to show them what you know, they're not going to take the time to give you the time, and they're definitely not going to give you money for the time you didn't give them. So you got to sit down with them. You got to show value. If you just got into business and you don't know anything, you need to learn it. And I don't know everything. I tell people all the time, I was like, I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to find out. The whole fake it until you make it, that's BS. That's going to get you a lawsuit. If you don't know, tell them, I don't know. I just got into business 6 weeks ago, but I'm going to work harder for you than Bernardo that's been in the business 23 years because I need that check. You know, just be honest. And 9 times out of 10, people are going to identify with it and go like, yeah, I like this guy or this lady or this girl or whatever. But value, that's the only thing we have to bring to the table. If you don't bring that to the table, they're not going to sign the buyer's broker agreement, or they're going to sign it and then they're going to cancel it. And they're going to go over to another agent. So that's my spin.
So I want to add something real quick because we're going to end this. Something he said at the beginning about when he was meeting me, and he asked me where we wanted to meet. Now it's a referral, so it might be okay to go to the house. Now he mentioned coffee shop. He mentioned meeting at the office so you feel safe, that kind of stuff. This is segue. So tomorrow is the 2 CE credit on realtor safety here in the classroom, lunch and learn. But FBLI inspections will be here to do that. So if you're looking for an inspector to meet, there's one. And Realtor Safety Month is in September. So we wanted to get that out quickly. But I want to segue from what you said before.
Yeah, but you know, now just going back to,
and there are like 5 spots left.
Going back to the whole compliance thing we talked about in the beginning. Whatever you do for one person, you do for everyone. So if a nice young lady calls and says, oh yeah, can you come to my house? And then next thing you know, a guy calls and you're like, hell no, I'm not going there. That's a fair housing violation. So you got to figure out, you know, how you're going to do it 100% of the time, and you got to stick to that 100% of the time. You know, you got to tell them at least the same thing. And then, you know, I would say if it's not a referral, I would meet at the office or I would meet at a public place 100% of the time. If it's a referral that you can tie to someone that you actually know, then it's entirely up to you. It's not safe to go into someone's home. It's not. So I'm not preaching that, but there are some benefits to it. You know, I can get away with it because I'm not attractive and I'm 6'2", 245 pounds. So, you know, I think I could get away with
Also,
a little bit more.
need the mirror.
Exactly.
Or a bathroom.
Exactly.
Or a bathroom.
So, yeah, but I mean, I you know, that's the only.
All right, this was fun. But hopefully this helped a lot of people. You know, Bernardo and I will be working on this because this is the first time we did this. So as like he was saying, some of those numbers are old. So any of the information that we've attached to the PDFs in there, that's the information you need. The other stuff, maybe one of the agents was asking about how he could get some of these numbers and stuff. You know, your fellow agents in every class you go to, the ones we have every month, ask who they're using and who they trust. And my suggestion would be, if they start overlapping and saying the same names, those are the ones that go on your list. You know what I mean? I always have plenty of affiliates with the Pinellas County Realtor Organization that I've worked with and I've done presentations with and we've done classes with. So if you need something, email me. I can give you a couple people, and then just let them know I that I don't get anything out of it, but just let them know I told you about them. That'd be nice for them to know.
And that's where you create value, by basically bringing people to the table that, if nothing else, are not gonna take advantage of them. That's the main goal, is to keep your buyers safe, right? As much as you can. And all the classes they're offered here and offered at the board. I mean, I do an insurance class here that is, I mean, it's pretty detailed, almost as much as this one is.
It is
And
a
I know
great
some
class.
people hate this because it's too much information, it's too long and so on. And I get it, but it's pretty detailed stuff that you should know as an agent before you show a house, because insurance is a big deal here. So if you don't know all this stuff, you're maybe showing a house that is going to be $6,000 a year for insurance to a buyer that has a $1,800 budget for payment. That's not going to line up. You're wasting their time.
That'll help you take notes when you're walking around with the first-time
Right.
buyer to be like, hey,
And-
that's not going to get covered.
Right, and it's going to help you have information that you can share with them when you meet with them for the first time, to create that value, to create that he knows more than me, I need him, versus why do I need him for? You know what I mean? I mean, that's kind of what the idea is. They need to look at you for guidance, and if you're not showing that you know how to guide them, they can go anywhere else.
Thanks all for coming.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thank you. Very worthwhile, you did a good job.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Sorry if it was too long.
So is it possible to have you email me the PDFs that you attached in the chat?
Yeah, I think I can do that.
Nope. Don't. Once
They
you
sell- they
you
sell-
can't give Deb
Here-
anything because you're gonna have to go a mile. You're
You know
gonna
what
give
the-
her a butt. Then
you
you're
know
gonna
what-
have to go a mile.
You know what was the first thing that came to mind when you asked?
Oh no, what?
A box of pencils at Staples.
Oh.
Yeah,
You can buy them anywhere. If you don't know how to use it, it's not gonna.
not gonna help you.
You can.
Okay, well then
Yeah,
don't
just-
bother, I'll
No,
reinvent it on Canva after my
No, I send it.
stellar
I'll send it
class
to you,
the
but
other
it's
day.
all branded, so you're gonna have to kind of copy
Yeah,
anyway.
I'd like that as well.
Do me a favor.